Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Film Frauds, and myself, Matt, my co-host, Tyler,
Hello.
providing completely unprofessional, 100% biased opinions on the movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear. And today we are continuing our two-man journey into finding the modern classics of film of our generation. Tyler, this was your idea. What is the Search for Modern Classics series about? What is our mantra?
I just want to completely derail it already, Matt. We were talking
Okay,
for like 30
good.
minutes before, and you didn't say anything
Yes.
about my haircut. And I'm a little insulted.
Yeah, well, I feel like if I said something, you'd be even more insulted. So I decided not to say anything.
I look like a broccoli, like the stem of a broccoli right now.
I was like, wow, did Tyler get a Great Gatsby haircut? Did he ask for the F. Scott Fitzgerald?
My barber, in the meantime, was talking about Santa like all leather S&M costumes. It was a wild haircut, and I was trying to get out there as fast as possible. Okay, sorry. I just
So you're like dodging in and out from the scissors, right?
I literally came in. He's like, "Did you see this speech by this Republican political candidate?" I'm like, "Dude, it's like 11 in the morning. Like, I'm not doing this right now." Okay. The Search for Modern Classics. You didn't say anything at the first start. I'm like, I'm gonna wait till we record. The Search for Modern Classics. We basically look at movies from like 2000. We keep changing the initial date, like
Yes.
when we're gonna. But like, let's
like
say,
vaguely 2000,
10.
2010s, and
Yeah.
2020s.
Because I feel like if we go back too far to like early 2000s and we're talking about like The Matrix, and nobody wants to hear our thoughts of The Matrix, that hasn't been said 1,000
We're gonna do
times.
Before Sunrise though at some point, which is
Not Before
2006
Sunrise.
or something.
We're gonna do Before Sunrise.
Sunset.
Before Midnight is 2013.
No, but Before Sunset is like 2000s.
2006. When was before?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, basically, we look at movies from that time period, or like
Idiot.
from now. I'm sorry. And we basically try to identify what movies we think are going to be classics like 40, 50 years down the line, because it's an impossible challenge, but also something we think is just invariably very interesting. We've grown up in this time period. Movies have changed. Movie culture has changed. And we'll probably see in our next few movies we talk about, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse, a lot of changing stuff. And we just think it's really interesting to kind of deep dive into it. Matt, do you want to take a ride on my magical mystery tour and talk about this movie?
First Reformed?
First Reformed? Yes.
2018's First Reformed?
2017.
2017's
already
First
failing.
Reformed. Yeah, already bad. At least at least when we did the Burma one, I immediately forgot what Inarritu's first name was.
Yeah.
So I almost said Alejandro, but that'd be wrong.
That would be wrong.
So,
Matt,
but today we're doing First Reformed by Paul Schrader.
I have decided to keep a journal, to set down all my thoughts and the simple events of my day. I will keep this diary for 1 year, and at the end of that time, it will be destroyed.
Yeah, you chose this movie.
17. Yes, yeah. I did choose this movie.
Why did you?
Because we saw it in theaters, I believe, together.
We did.
I don't think I knew about this movie at all. And you said we should watch it. And at the time, we were watching a movie pretty much every weekend in the theater. And so we decided to watch First Reformed. And it was a movie that got very little buzz, I remember, initially. It did get a semi-wide release. It came to my theater, which isn't like a big theater.
Yeah.
So it got a semi-decent wide release, but it wasn't really like this film festival darling, I remember, or like a huge Oscar contender. Reasonably, not like a Parasite or something. Like there wasn't any reports of it getting like 30-minute standing ovations or anything like that, as far as I'm aware.
Do you remember like the time? Like I remember why I chose to see it, and that was because, or why I was like, hey, we should see this. And I think it was like all the like movie YouTubers we used to watch were like talking about this movie as like the best of 2017. And I'm like, we have to, like, I guess we have to go see it. We didn't know really who Paul Schrader was at the time.
No.
What his whole thing is. And I remember, like, I think we went to the 99 before. We went to the 99. We went to that movie. And by the end of it, we drove home in like the dark and just being like, I don't know, man. Your guess is like as good as mine. Like, that was odd.
So Paul Schrader is the writer and director of this movie. He's also the writer of such indie films as Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
He is one of the most prolific screenwriters of our generation, of like the living screenwriters, I should say. He's not really of our generation. You've seen way more of his movies than I have. I watched Taxi Driver for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, last night. I mean,
Wow.
no, 2 nights ago. Yes.
Did you like it?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I really did enjoy Taxi Driver. I pretty much knew like what was gonna happen in the movie. And
Yep.
even then, I still really enjoyed it, and I was kind of blown away by like the extreme, like what this movie was able to do. Um, Mainly regarding Jodie Foster. I was like, my jaw was on the floor. I was like, I cannot believe that they
Yeah.
got away with filming this. And yeah, it's a legendary movie. It kickstarted Paul Schrader's career, kickstarted Robert De Niro's career, kickstarted tons of careers of everyone involved within the
Yep.
movie, and rightfully so. But here we have Paul Schrader as an older gentleman. He was in his, I think he was 29 when Taxi Driver came out, and he's like in his late 60s at this point when First Reformed came out. And First Reformed is a movie starring Ethan Hawke, and is about a priest who is talking with one of the congregates of his church, which is on the south, like the border between like what was once like north and the south back in Civil War times. It was used as like a slave shelter.
Yeah.
But now it is just one of like this conglomerate of mega churches, and he's a relatively humble pastor, also former veteran, divorcee, and also his son was killed while serving in Iraq. So a huge backstory. But basically, he has a conversation with one of his congregates who is a young husband who is an environmentalist, and he's bordering on environmental extremism. And they have a conversation about whether or not he is justified or morally right in bringing a child into a world which, by all accounts, is decaying because of global warming and other climate issues. And then this kickstarts a downward spiral within the character of Ethan Hawke's character, Father Toller. And, just really feel good movie. Really makes you feel like we're really doing well as a society. And Paul Schrader just consistently makes really feel good movies.
Yeah.
And so before we get into what the movie is, I just want to read like a quote by Paul Schrader from an interview with Roger Ebert. Not Roger Ebert, because he was already no longer with us when this movie came out, but on the Roger Ebert website, about like why he made this movie. Because a guy who's like in his late 60s writes and directs this movie, this seemingly comes out of nowhere. And I was really fascinated in the backstory. So I'll read this quote as follows. The origin story of the movie. Oh, wait, that's my note.
I'm not getting rid of that one. I'm keeping that one in.
Okay. I wrote that book called The Transcendentalism in Film as a young man, and I have now rewritten it and brought it up to date to include things like Tarkovsky and slow cinema. I was interested in that book because it was a bridge between my seminary training and my love of the movies. Once I got involved with movies, I put that behind me. People would try to connect that book with the films I was making, and I would tell them that they were wrong because I wasn't that guy. I was intoxicated with action and empathy and sex and violence. And these are not things found in Transcendental Toolkit. I just was not going to make those movies. About 3 years ago, I met Paul Schrader at the New York Society of Film Critics. He had done a film called Ida, and we got to talking. I liked the film a lot, and we started to talk about spiritual cinema and contemplative cinema and how budgets were going down, how films that would once have been financially irresponsible were now financially responsible. Afterwards, I walked uptown and thought, it's time to write that movie that you swore you would never write. And that's how it started. So first, do you know who Paul Schrader is?
No idea. No idea.
You don't know the film Ida?
We've talked about. Didn't I watch Ida?
You watched another movie by him called Cold War.
Oh, that's right. I did watch Cold War. He's friends with that guy.
Yes.
Okay.
So I watched Ida in preparation for our Cold War podcast episode. And it definitely follows that transcendentalism formula. And I think, looking at this movie through like a transcendental sphere is interesting because he's inspired by people like Tarkovsky and Michelangelo Antonioni. In other interviews I saw with him when talking about transcendental filmmaking, he does call these movies boring, but also meditative. Like he says, like being bored is part of the experience. And I kind of view First Reformed as like the evolution of transcendental filmmaking, as in like it is slow and methodical, but it's shorter, and I think does more with every scene.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, at that quote, meant anything to you as you're watching? Do you think you view this as a transcendental film? I know you've seen some Tarkovsky movies before. Like, do you see
Yeah.
that here? Is this
So
movie different from Paul Schrader's other movies as well?
So it's really complicated. So I've seen out of the Paul Schrader movies, I've seen Taxi Driver, I've seen Raging Bull. He was writers on that one. I mean, he was a frequent collaborator with Scorsese. I watched Bringing Out the Dead in preparation for this one. Have not seen it. Very fascinating movie. I watched Blue Collar when it
Yeah.
was like 1974, like working class movies. I have seen First Reformed. I've seen Mishima, and I've seen The Card Counter, which is technically First Reformed, Card Counter, and Master Gardener are part of his like unofficial trilogy into like grieving men like punishing themselves with isolation in like kind of like that kind of thematic elements. But if you've seen like any purveyor of like slow cinema, whether it's like Bresson or Tarkovsky or like anybody like that, it comes through very apparently. I know you said he didn't really start focusing on that until later movies, but his movie Mishima is like a very slow, deliberate, like very moving movie. And I think those themes have like been present, or that style has been present. Olive even has that transcendental book that you just talked about on our bookshelf over there. The aspect of transcendental filmmaking is just like an inherently interesting approach to a movie in his style, especially coming from like a post Scorsese collaboration, really.
Yes. Would you consider this movie to be like remarkably different from the other movies he's written or directed, or both?
Thematically, no. He's always been someone who's clearly focused on like men, what society does to men, and how like their own demons punish them. I mean, First Reformed is thematically very similar to Bringing Out the Dead. There's themes of like societal suppression over like working class people. In Blue Collar, that's similar to like the self-punishment of like authority in like Card Counter. There is like very similar thematic themes. The difference is Paul Schrader as a director, which has definitely changed. Mishima maybe has a better through line to what we have now, but from my understanding, I haven't seen a lot of his like 2000s movies, but they're vastly different. But
Yeah.
thematically, they're the same. Stylistically, they've changed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting, isn't it?
so, yeah, it is interesting. And so, First Reformed for me feels like a movie that has been contemplated for decades,
Yeah.
but then like made within the matter of like a week or two.
Yeah.
Um, and when I suggested this movie last time we talked, I was kind of threw the name out there. Like I didn't, because I remember we watched it, and I was like, it's a shorter movie. I kind of wanted to rewatch it,
Yeah.
and so I just threw it out there. And when I first saw it, it didn't have a particularly big impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
But then on rewatching it, I think this is one of the best movies of 2010s. With the movies that we've done so far in our modern classics series,
Yeah.
I would actually only rank Birdman as being better than
Wow.
this movie.
So
Than any other.
we've done Decision
So
to
like
Leave.
between like
Yeah.
Decision to Leave, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, this and Birdman, like I
Okay.
think for me, just like purely subjective, I think that First Reformed is like second best. It is very contemplative,
Mhm.
and at one point, like I was like so absorbed in the movie on my rewatch that like I paused it to use the bathroom, and I was like, I only have 30 minutes left.
Yeah.
Like it just flew by for me, and which is funny because like I didn't remember being particularly impacted by it. I remember a few scenes specifically, but I don't remember. I remember walking out being like, oh, that was all right. I
Yeah.
don't know. Has this movie changed for you on a rewatch? Like, what are your thoughts on
Oh my
First
God.
Formed for your second viewing?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty similar, but we left that theater in like 2017. It may have been like early 2018, 2017, wherever we saw it. And we were both like, dude, I don't know like what this movie was. Because it's weird. You don't see a movie like this every so often. I mean, mild spoilers, but there are more like surreal, ethereal sequences at a point in this movie. And I remember us looking at each other in the theater and being like, what? Like,
Mm.
what is any of this? And at the time when you're like younger, first kind of like exploring movies, something like this doesn't necessarily stand out for better reasons. It's almost like too odd at times, too fast. It's too slow. There's too much like ideological imposing on it almost at first, but now maybe it's like I'm better watched. I'm more like I just need different movies that aren't like the same type of big blockbuster movie that I go and see like 3 times a month. But yeah, this movie rocks. Like, it's so good. It's such a good movie. It's not my favorite Schrader. I do like Mishima more. I I think like yeah, probably Mishima's good. Blue Collar was really, really excellent. But goddamn, there was like something like I don't know if it's like I've just seen a lot of bad movies recently, but being able to see something that is clearly because he had Final Cut on this movie. There was an interview I watched where he basically at a certain point, he like many like auteur filmmakers, the studios come in and they're like, this is too weird, man. Nope, nobody's gonna want to watch this. And he has been on record saying like his movie Hardcore he doesn't like. He views it as a young man's movie because the ending was changed. Because he lost the ending, and he had this is his movie through and through. He had Final Cut. He knew exactly what he was doing here, and it's very apparent that this is a movie made by like with like righteous indignation about hope, life, despair, like art, culture, youth. Like there's a lot of really, really fascinating, albeit kind of like if you've seen a Paul Schrader movie, it's very expected. Kind of like ideologue, like
People write man writing in journal.
man writing a journal. That is literally like the card counter starts with a man like in a very similar room being like, I'm writing in a journal. And from my understanding about Master Gardener, it's the exact same. Whether or not that works for you, I think Card Counter is a much less effective movie. If you've seen Card Counter, I know some people love it, but Tiffany Haddish and Ty Sheridan in that movie are not good. This movie is like the pinnacle of what I think is capable with his like slow cinema, like disaffected self-punishment men. It's fascinating. What do you think?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you say, and I think especially on a rewatch, I realize how like immediate everything is. Like when you watch an Antonioni movie or a Tarkovsky movie, and it's like yes, it's boring on purpose, but there's also a lot of like superfluous elements as well. Whereas with this film, it's like even though the scenes are slow and there are scenes with no dialogue and it's more atmospheric, everything seems like it has meaning to it.
Yeah.
And I guess we can get into the movie at this point. The first big scene, which is like one of the opening scenes, is when he's having a conversation with the young man, whose name is Michael, who is married to Amanda Seyfried's character, and she's pregnant and she's about to give birth. And I think Amanda Seyfried calls him over to talk to Michael because she's afraid that he's going on the deep end because he's reading a lot of articles about how the environment is dying and is having a crisis of faith and crisis of like of his meaning here. And I think their conversation basically kind of perfectly summarizes Paul Schrader himself, because in my research, he grew up in like a Protestant community and he was raised Protestant and he's still like a believer. He still goes to church. He says he's very meditative, but at the same time in interviews, he specifically has said that he does not think that the humans are going to survive past 2100 and because of the environment. And whether or not you believe that is up to you, but like there is, scientific proof that temperature is getting warmer and it's going to affect the environment.
Yeah, we're damaging
whether or not we're
country.
all going to die is something else for it to make, but you cannot deny that it is having impact on the earth, and because having impact on the earth is going to have an impact on people. And there's a quote that Toller says about the yin and yang of sort of having courage and despair. Like you can't be hopeful if you don't have despair, and if you're just always if you're always in despair, then there's no hope. And he also says, he quotes like I think another biblical scholar saying that despair is like the ultimate form of pride, where if you fully give in to despair, like you've given up on the creativity of God.
Yeah, I think it's Thomas Merton he's reading.
Yes,
the movie.
yes, exactly. Merton. And their conversation, especially early on, and like how it defies like the pre-stereotype where Ethan Hawke's character is being challenged by this guy, and he specifically says he finds it exhilarating. Like he likes being challenged and likes being put to the test. I thought it was such an interesting and immediate way to like defy the pre-stereotype. So he's much like Brendan Gleeson Calvary, in which like both are priest characters constantly being challenged with their faith, but they sort of embrace that challenge to a certain extent. They're not just like mindless puppets rereading biblical scriptures. They think critically about it and they want to adapt biblical scriptures to the present day. And they also have a feeling that the Bible doesn't necessarily completely summarize all of God's thoughts, and there's exceptions, blah blah blah. And so my question for you is like, what do you think of that opening scene? Did you think that it was like the perfect lead-in to the movie? Do you think that like what's being set up in this opening scene is fulfilled later on? Because my opinion is I think it's like the ideal first conversation to have. And I think that everything explored in that first scene all plays in later
Yeah.
on in the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree that that scene is riveting, and I think it also, I think it ties into one how Paul Schrader doles out information about his characters, very early, even just like the build up to that scene. Before I even get to that, is like you're opening the movie with like very conventional approaches to like Catholicism and mass. Like you see the movements of it, you see the almost like aesthetic ASC, or like a kind of like lifestyle. And then slowly, while the character's journaling, he's like, he kind of like says the line, I think it's like, I should stop caring about whether people like me. And it's like the
Yeah.
first moment of like humanization. And he's like, I look at those lines with disdain. And then you're like, whoa, okay. So there's that slow buildup of information, which ultimately culminates in that exact conversation that you say, where we find out about Reverend Toller and his son and his backstory and his approach to life. And like it was exhilarating. And then how he went back at night and was like, I thought over every line, everything I could have said, everything I should have said, everything that could have been said better. And yeah, I mean, that conversation ultimately is the main theme of the movie. It's life and love versus despair, and it's a through line that is followed throughout the entire movie into the very last shot of the movie. Not only is it like hauntingly kind of beautiful, because you yourself, I think, as an audience member, kind of feel yourself. It's one of those things of like, our generation has this constant, probably like looming fear that like, yeah, we're probably all screwed with climate change. Like it's gonna impact us in some capacity. And like you're slowly sucked in as he kind of like the character of Michael, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
It like just like is like very passionate, like we're screwed, we're screwed, we're screwed. And you kind of like you find yourself being pulled between both perspectives during the conversation. You when the camera like cuts on Michael and he gives this kind of impassioned speech, you feel like you have like kind of gone to his side a little bit. And when it cuts back to Ethan Hawke's character, you feel the same. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful conversation. It's arguably like maybe the best part of the movie. And it's very early on. It's utterly fascinating.
Mm. And it's funny because Paul Schrader has said that Reverend Toller's arc in this arc, that he's like, he says like there's like this in Christianity, in the actual teachings, you're not supposed to harm yourself. Like St. Augustine says, you're not supposed to harm yourself. But when you look at like the history of Christianity and in of like other faiths as well, like martyrdom is like a huge part of it. Like jihad is a huge part of it. And so when he sort of succumbs to extremism and is like you know, sort of imagining himself like killing himself for a greater cause, it's ultimately like a selfish thing. It's not supposed to be a good thing. And like to see it as like a maturing on Paul Schrader's part as well, because like kind of similar to like Martin Scorsese, like Goodfellas is like, even though like it portrays the mobster as being like the violence of being a mobster, like when you get to the Irishman, like the last shot of like the sad old man sitting by himself, and like watching all those other sad old men friends like slowly die, like that's not in good in Irishman. Here he could have gone the Travis Bickle approach of like the main character who is a bad guy, but certain groups of today's society view him as a hero, where he goes out guns blazing. But here it's ultimately he chooses to like die in a very quiet, and we'll see if he actually kills himself or not. But ultimately the ending doesn't have that explosion, if you will, that you would expect. And so like as the movie goes on, and how it deals with like the merging of like environmentalism with Christianity. So like when you have the first scene with the choir singing, they're singing blood in the Lamb song, which is also a funny scene because like they're not paying attention to the lyrics at all. Like they're just singing, and like the guy pinches the girl's butt at one point. Like they don't care at all what's going on. They're just reading the scripture without thinking about it. And then later on, when at Michael's burial, like this thing, they do like another like choir singing of like Mother Earth, about saving the Earth. Like, what do you think about like that blending of like two different? Like, did you think that environmentalism in this movie is like some sort of like extremism as well? Because I looked at Paul Schrader's interviews, like he's fully believes that the world is going to end by 2100. But at the same time, when I'm watching this movie, I think like I can't help but feel like he's making a connection between like one extremism and the other
Yeah.
extremism. Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that's like one of the core tenets. I mean, one of the things we're gonna have to spoil this movie if we're talking like
Yeah,
major
we're going
thematic
fully spoilers. Yeah.
spoilers, whatever. If you haven't seen it already, pause this, go watch it, come back. They're revealed that Michael has built like a suicide vest.
Yes.
Or we don't know what he would use it for, but you see Ethan Hawke's character like look up like one video, and you kind of get the summation of like what it was probably intended for in some capacity to make a statement. Usually most like martyrdom, they are to make a statement, they die for a cause. But I mean, that's ultimately like Ethan Hawke's character like kind of like laments and like judges Michael's like despair, but at the same time that's exactly what his character is doing. He's willingly suffering from some kind of sickness. We later find out in the
Yes.
movie it's stomach cancer, but he's doing this not because it's like holy, but he's doing it as a form of like punishment. It's a form of extremism. He feels responsible for the death of his son, who he says that he's like, yeah, like it was like a male thing in our family to push the sons to go to war. Is Ernst Toller's character was a army reverend
Yes.
in the war, and he pushed his son to go, and he was killed. He views that as a failure, so he is constantly punishing himself, whether it's in isolation, whether it's in like engaging in like alcoholism at a certain
Yeah.
point, or the willingness
Cutting
to
himself off from people who like care about him as well.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, I have a kind of a stupid question because
Yeah.
this might be a really dumb question. The woman who we constantly see at one point who he calls, and I quote, you are a stumbling block. That woman? Yeah. That was his ex-wife, right?
That's my implication. I
Okay.
think.
I had like I was sitting there and I was like, is that his ex-wife? Someone a lot smarter than me will probably look at that and go, yeah, you're dumb. Of course it is. But I thought they were kind of implied
Yeah,
like,
you're dumb. Of course it is.
thank you. Yeah. Um, I mean the aspect of like it's the movie is using like a very real fear that people have to shed light on the commentary of like religious extremism, religious martyrdom, self-immolation, self-punishment, like regret and fear. It's all interwoven into this one like story. It's done very beautifully too.
Yeah, like the plight of like making your life mean something
Yeah.
as well. Like the Christian martyrs wanted to all die so for like prideful purposes,
Yep.
basically. And it's also interesting because it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where like
Yep.
Ethan Hawke at one point is, as the movie goes on, he's again succumbing to alcoholism. He's cutting people off from his life and just focusing solely on the environment. And it's like, of course, you're gonna think the world's gonna end and everything is meaningless if you're purposefully, cutting yourself off from everything, from any sort of joy in your life. So there's that as well, which I noticed. Like is he purposefully cutting himself off from making his life worse so that he can further justify killing himself and further justify like all of his research that he's doing
Yeah.
and like his shifting worldview and things like that.
Well,
It's just such like a thoughtful movie, and what I really like about it is that there's so many angles to look at it from
yeah.
as well, and that's like one of the many things that blew me away
Yeah. I mean,
with this movie.
nobody can say that Paul Schrader is subtle. These
No.
movies are not subtle in the slightest. But like I don't know if it's at the start. Like the start of the movie's character isn't aimed to like kill himself. He's just a character who is. He doesn't have despair. He has quote unquote courage to isolate, like you said, to exist. I mean, like, I'm assuming that woman was his wife, a ex-wife,
Yeah.
because he even says he's like, you remind me of like my failings, my insecurities, like the worst part of me. Like you are a stumbling block into me getting better. And it's only once he does fall into despair, as evident by the magical mystery tour scene where you see the beauty of humanity in Earth and the nature and people, like what is created here, borderline on religious, religious text at that point. Then it immediately in the same sequence cuts to the destruction we're doing. That
Yeah.
shot of like all the tires is like legitimately kind of like haunting.
Yes.
Where you're like, whoa, is the character itself giving over to despair? He's giving into the feeling of like my life will have meaning if I martyrdom myself and take another like sinner with me, which ultimately is we can talk about the ending of the movie in a little bit, but I mean, there's like deep religious like breakdown of ideologies here, and it's like it's a lot. Like it's even on another watch, it's a lot of a movie to go through.
And even then, like when he's doing like that small circle discussion,
Yeah,
and like that guy is like blaming everything on Muslims, like that's another
yeah,
form of extremism. Where
yeah,
and then he's like, this is earlier on, this is before he falls in despair. But Toller's like, what are these people thinking? Like, how could you think
yeah.
what this kid's thinking? All that, this is so interesting to me. What do you think about like the green screen meditative scene between him and Amanda Seyfried? Because to me, I think it's the worst part of the movie.
Really?
I think it's like the buzz scene where like people come out of like the film festival like, oh, like there's this crazy scene in First Reformed. I
Yeah.
don't think it's necessary. I understand, like, maybe looking from a transcendentalist standpoint,
Mhm.
like I understand a little bit better why it's there, but for me, like, it feels like it's there just to be like that, like the buzz scene, I guess, for the movie.
Yeah, so that's like, what was it like? Do you remember what you felt like after watching it for the first time? Like, do you remember what you thought?
I just like I couldn't even believe it. Like I thought, first of all, I was like, this is not subtle at all. Now I
Yeah,
look at it through a different lens.
yeah,
At first I thought it was like, oh, it does environmentalism stuff.
yeah,
And now I see it differently. I still think it has like the political message to it, but
yeah,
which, I mean, why saving the earth and saving humanity is political?
yeah,
I don't understand that, but it is in our times a political message.
yeah.
But I do see it through a different lens now. But at the same time, I do feel like it was made as like a scene that was supposed to generate buzz too.
That is like that. So that's an interesting thing. And from when I remember first watching it and being like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't understand it, because when you, like I said, like I think earlier, when you're like your only major form of like film consumption is like the big event movies.
Yeah.
That was what I was doing when I was. I mean, shit, this movie came out in 2017. We're sophomores in college at that point. Like, I was
Yes.
not exploring like the deep annals of like film and cinema. And at the time, it's like, I don't really know what this is. And maybe it's because now, like, watched more. I'm older now. I've seen more, but like to me, like it's not subtle, but like some of my favorite directors aren't subtle. And I found it to be like very bold in a way that I utterly respected. I don't know if it is 100% effective, because there is definitely a point where you're kind of sitting there like, this is so odd. And it's like, even with like it's like, it's really odd, but like I kind of just respected how bold of a choice it was to include a sequence that is like very clearly, I mean, like we haven't even talked about how this movie looks, how this is like one of the better looking movies that I've seen in a
Yes.
long time. But the fact that it's so like evidently different and not as good looking as the other movie, but it's the message is like there and direct. I kind of respect the hell out of it. I kind of really like it. And I think my opinions on it will only grow in rewatches. And this
Mm.
isn't something I find myself act like. How do you think you like when you watch? Because I imagine this is going to be a movie you probably watch again in the future.
Yeah, so I'm gonna clarify. Like this, that scene didn't ruin the movie
Yeah.
for me, as film reviewers on YouTube will normally say. It ruined the film.
Yeah, ruined
This 2 minute sequence
Yeah.
ruined it. It was bad.
Yeah, a 2 hour movie, 2 minutes of it is just tanked it for you.
Yes, yeah, 0 out of 10. I understand its meaning, and maybe
Yeah.
like I'm being a little cynical and I say it's like made for like buzz. It's like to
I
generate buzz.
understand that. I can get that.
Um, but again, like it's like Paul Schrader's like in his like late 60s, and he's like making this like personal movie, completely going against his own filmmaking
Yeah.
style just to do this. And yeah, as I said, like with his history with Christianity, and looking at interviews and how much he really thinks about Christian texts and like the changing of the environment. Like this is such like a bold and personal movie to me.
Yeah.
And we can get into the visuals of the movie. Even like right from the beginning, it's like black screen, white text, First
Yeah.
Reformed, very
Yeah.
stripped down. And it's basically it's set in a small town in the winter, and yes, beautiful shots.
Yeah.
Especially how like one scene where it's also like there are two scenes in the woods, like one where he finds Michael's body with his head blown up, and again,
yeah.
slow scene, slow pander. And I remember distinctly when we watched that in the video the first time, like I was shocked.
I didn't remember that at all.
You did not remember that at all?
At
Like,
all. Yeah, that was, so it was equally shocking when you get the cut of like the head blown in half.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, completely forgot about it.
And then a similar scene later on outside where he's riding a bike with Amanda Seyfried's character. And
Yeah.
again, with self-fulfilling prophecies, like when he's working out and he's engaging people socially,
Yeah.
his attitude improves
Yeah.
and his optimism and his journals improve. But yes, very stripped down but beautiful movie.
Mhm.
And the mega churches are like have like this like 1940s like German expressionist film kind of vibe to them,
Yeah.
where like it's like very stark white,
Yeah.
not very there's not any personality. Like you go to a Catholic church, there's like, you know, the beautiful windows and
Yeah.
things like that. Here it's like just like brutalist style.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got a similar feeling
Okay.
from that, but yeah, very like almost like fascist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like there is like, I mean, Paul. I mean, like we are not like we don't want to talk too much about like our religious stance in here,
Yeah.
but it's no argument that like in the base form of like Christianity, capitalism invariably like infecting religion is just worse for everybody. These mega churches, I mean, they look like offensive.
Yeah.
They look like they are like there is a corporate element to it. When there's that one scene of they're setting up. So like the context of this movie is like it's 250 years of this first Reformed church. It's like the reconsecration. It's a big event. It's all leading to this event, and you get this very like corporate sense. Is there a cafeteria in the church?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's like this major
Yes.
like when you're talking to like one of the other pastors and he's like, "Do you know how much I have to do to keep this place run?" Like all these stuff and you're like, "Are you running a business or are you
Yeah.
running like a small church?" And I mean that I think shows in the filmmaking too that the scenes in the First Reformed Church are like beautiful. There's like a certain like framing where like everything's very centered, everything looks like gorgeous and it looks very like lived in with character. And then you're right, you like you go to the mega church and it looks like an embodiment of like capitalist fascism. Like it's
Yes.
like absolutely fascinating.
And even like the politics there were like, yeah, where Michael that the singers sing the song about Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And the politician guy takes it as like as a political statement, goes, not
Yeah.
a political statement. How is protecting the earth a political statement?
Yeah.
And things like that.
Bulk. Ed Bulk.
Yes. Yes. What do you think of Cedric the Entertainer in this movie?
So which one's that's Cedric the Entertainer?
Yes.
That's really?
Yes.
I did not know that. I literally was like, well, I mean, it's hard. Everybody in this movie is dwarfed by Ethan Hawke, who we haven't also talked about yet, which we'll have to talk about. It's almost like a disservice to where you have one character who every look like Cedric the Entertainer is really good. Everybody's really great in this movie. I forgot how much I like the actor who plays Michael.
Yeah.
I don't know, because for me, like, I was so mesmerized by Ethan Hawke that every other actor, even like Amanda Seyfried, who is the second build in this movie, kind of like falls to the wayside for me. Like I watch sequences, like one of my favorite sequences is when the pastor, Cedric the Entertainer, and Ed Bulk meet at the dinner where they have that first confrontation. And I wasn't focused on what Cedric the Entertainer and Ed Bulk the character were talking about. I was just looking at Ethan Hawke, who's just kind of sitting there on the side, just kind of like not really doing anything.
Yeah.
Just kind of like a clear and like deep introspection. Like, and we've gotten so much of that character. He's just like, I couldn't take my eyes off of him. And then he finally like he's handed one of the pamphlets and he looks at it. And then you cut to him and it's like it's so masterfully done that like everybody fails in comparison to Ethan Hawke. To me, at least in this movie.
I was gonna say, like, I actually thought Cedric Alexander, the wrestler, Cedric the Entertainer was really great in the movie.
Again, he is, yeah.
And like he kind of has that Ray Romano, Tyler Perry vibe, where it's like a comedic actor goes into a drama, and they just bring in like even the logic of the movie, like you want like a charismatic, like a mega church, a corporate conglomerate is going to want like a charismatic guy to lead the church. And you look at Cedric the Entertainer, you're like, this guy seems like a nice guy. Like you want to trust him naturally. You want to assume the best. And like, I thought it made sense on that level too. I thought he was really good in the movie. And it's just interesting, like how these actors like will just randomly take on like a dramatic role, like a serious dramatic role. And Paul Schrader in an interview with Cedric the Entertainer was saying like when they first called, he's like, I want you to be charismatic but not funny, which I thought he did perfectly. You know, he's charismatic, and like their conversation with Ethan Hawke, where he's like, why can't we talk more about the environment? And he goes like, well, maybe he's like, why would God want us to be destroyed? And he goes, when Cedric Entertainer goes, well, they did it for 40 days to 40 nights. You remember? How are we supposed to interpret as well? Like that sort of like the clash of like reading the Bible, like interpreting text, sort of like parallels the clash of like you see a picture of a polar bear starving like on like on a piece of ice, and you're like, well, that's just one polar bear.
Yeah.
Or that's a symptom. That's like that means like the world is the seawater's levels are rising. So it's like that clash of like we both see the same thing, but we interpret it differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ethan Hawke is great in this movie. I laughed. I don't know if I should have laughed. I think it's supposed to be like darkly funny, but like when the kids come and he's showing them like the slave where the slaves hid, and he goes, "Hey kids, like you want to open that thing over there?" Like talking to them like kids, like and he goes, "This is where they hid." And they cried and they prayed to God, wondering if anyone's going to save them. And it hard cuts to his face, like upward angle, where he's just like this. There's like no emotion in his face. It is so good. And it's like Paul Schrader just like clearly wrote that scene. Ethan Hawke was on board with it, but like I think it's intended to be a darkly humorous scene.
Oh my god, it's like that slow descent because he has, I think before that is
the camera angle too is perfect. Like everything about that.
He looks like slightly deranged. I mean, that's like, that's coming off the hills, the back of when like I think he had the interaction with Ed Balk at the diner where Ed Balk's like, he's like, why were you there at like this environmental like funeral? And he's like, oh, it was, I was counseling Michael and I was just kind of like helping out. And Ed Balk's like, so you counseled someone who then killed themselves. And you should and he's like, and you should probably get your own stuff in check before you like criticize me. And then he goes into the kids. He's like, this is where they begged and cried and it's like in here. And you're like, oh my God. It's I mean, like the descent into despair, the slow, subtle, like you see more alcohol. You see him like peeing blood and like throwing up, and
the visual of him pouring Pepto-Bismol into whiskey.
Oh my God,
so disturbing.
Yeah,
and it's like it probably like reminded me of toxins being spread into the environment, like greenhouse gases, like something like that, like something like two things are not supposed to merge together, merging together.
I'm assuming that was very like
it's not subtle, but like really unique symbolism.
Because it's the first in that movie, it's the first like break from kind of reality that we get because everything is shot very like
that's when the music starts to kick into I think around this part.
You get like people like sitting, you get people like him reflecting, and then all of a sudden you get like he pours the Pepto-Bismol and you get like a hard cut to the music. And I mean, everything in this movie is set up from him grabbing the barbed wire to you get the quick shot of the drain cleaner when he's unclogging the toilet. It's like the more I think about this movie, and I think this usually happens now when we talk about this movie more in depth, or we talk about movies in depth on the Search for Modern Classics, I just end up enjoying it more. I enjoy this movie more the more I think about it.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we get to the ending?
Oh my God. I think I want to ask you about Ethan Hawke because he's really weird.
Did he get any Oscar nominations?
No, this was one of those movies, the years where people were like, Ethan Hawke should probably be nominated. That was like the big like, okay, so this movie is super fascinating because like we'll talk about this more when we actually like vote on if it's a modern classic because we have to figure out what exactly modern classics are. And I think this will be a great definition movie to
I've been purposely not giving my thoughts at all about modern classics. Like I have a ton of thoughts and it's literally boiling inside me.
Me too.
I refuse to talk about it until we get to that point.
So do I. Okay, I'm glad we're in the exact same boat. Ethan Hawke is a really weird performer for me because he got me into like movies when the first like real theater experience, like where I was like, whoa, movies can be like immersive, like vastly weird experiences. Sinister. Watching Sinister in a theater and being like, this legitimately is like scaring me. I was 12 when I saw that in theaters when it came out in 2010.
This is art.
This is art. But like he's been in like great movies. He's clearly in Linklater's Before trilogy. He shows up on stuff here and there. He kind of has like, he's just like around, but he's like the most solid. Like every movie he's in, you're like, oh,
he's great in Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, and everything. I love Ethan Hawke. I wish he was like more recognized. He's doing a movie with his daughter, Maya Hawke, who's in Stranger Things, which apparently is decent. He wrote a book, which was on like every Barnes and Noble like new release shelf for like a solid year. I think it's finally like they started circling in book talk books more. So his book is gone. He's so
now
interesting.
He really made it.
And now he really made it. One of the first movies I can remember thinking like, wow, this is different is Gattaca. Where I was like, I want to watch Gattaca, and Gattaca's really great. Do you like Ethan Hawke? What's your relationship?
Yeah, I like him. I never realized how good of an actor he was until I watched the Before trilogy. Yeah. Like once you get to Before Midnight, like when you get to that movie, you're just not gonna be able to believe like what he's done with this character.
Love it.
So
Jesse,
he's a great actor. And again, who was nominated for like Best Actor for that year.
2017. Here, you ramble for a second. I'll look it up.
Ramble.
20. That'd be 2018. Best actor.
I'm gonna be
I
stone
think
cold silent.
was that Gary Oldman one for?
Oh,
Okay,
do
so
not
that
tell
was
me.
Gary Oldman, Darkest Hour 1. You had Timothy Chalamet, Call Me by Your Name. That was probably warranted. Daniel Day-Lewis, Phantom Thread, warranted.
Okay, yeah, that was warranted. Yeah.
Daniel Kaluuya, Get Out, warranted. Denzel
Yes.
Washington, Roman J. Israel, Esquire. No, it's not a
I
very
haven't seen
good
it, but
movie.
Denzel Washington's in it, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
assume yes.
I've seen it. It's by the guy who did Nightcrawler. It's like fine. He's good in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to argue that you couldn't have squeezed like an Ethan Hawke.
I mean, you could probably sub out Gary Oldman or Timothy Chalamet.
But Gary Oldman won for The Darkest Hour. He was doing
Yeah,
Churchill.
but that movie is awful.
That movie? So, I mean, Phantom Thread has stayed in the public discourse.
Yeah.
Get Out has. That's about it. Then Call Me by Your Name. Call Me by Your Name has stood out because of Chalamet. You like Ethan Hawke, like you said, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So he did not win. He was not nominated. I think this movie got snubbed completely. You want to talk about
I think Paul Schrader got like a screenplay nom.
Did he? That would make sense. Okay.
It's like his only Oscar nomination ever.
Yeah. I wrote down church selling merch. I thought was pretty funny. I thought that was pretty interesting, pretty good commentary. I also wrote down I wrote absolutely stupefying few minutes of cinema with the Magical Mystery Tour sequence. That was my note. I didn't know
the roller coaster ride.
Yeah,
it's a small dying world.
I just didn't know how else to. I watched it, paused it, rewatched it, and then wrote down that note and was like, I don't really know what to do here with this. Yeah, you want to talk about the ending?
Yeah, so I have a quote from Paul Schrader, like where he basically spells out how he interpreted the ending.
Okay.
If you want me to read it.
Yeah, I have my own interpretation that I don't think will change.
So I'm not going to read my note before this time.
Okay.
So I clear a scene and I put in parentheses because I was like, so just so I don't read it out loud. Okay, so before the film came out, I was taking it to festivals, and I would often ask the audience to raise their hands afterwards. I'd say, who thinks he's dead? It would be about half. I kind of like that. About half thought he was dead, and about half thought he was alive at the end. Part of me says it's a miracle. He is saved by a miracle. The other part of me says he's on all fours, like Jesus. He stood there in Gethsemane and said, please take this cup away. But he drank the cup of Drano, and now he's there dying. And God comes. This is the God that hasn't spoken to him for the whole movie. And as he's on all fours dying, God walks over to him and says, Reverend Toller, would you like to see what heaven looks like? I'm going to show it to you right now. I'm going to open the doors, and this is what it looks like. It looks like one long, slow kiss, and he's in heaven. So not the ending I interpreted from that.
That was, I'm not going to lie, you started reading that, and that went a complete different direction than I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, it's hard because like this is from an interview, so like it's stream of consciousness.
Yeah. From
Paul
an old
Schrader,
man.
So it's like difficult to really.
Have you seen what he like? I love Paul Schrader. That is like, he is like an old man now. It's like definitive. I watched this YouTube channel DP/50 or 30, where they basically just interview movies, and he starts off the interview. They're like, "Hey, how's it going?" He goes,
Yeah, I saw that.
He saw that one too, where he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, the person's like, "So do you like when people ask you questions about the movie?" He's like, "Not really."
Yeah, he said that he went to like Q&A's for his movies, but then didn't watch the movies before.
Yeah,
and then forgot.
Yeah,
who the characters were.
Yeah, they'd they'd ask a question, like, "I haven't thought about this movie in 20 years. I don't know, man. Who's that? Like, it's your movie." And he's like, "I don't remember." He is an old man.
I was laughing so hard, and then like I saw an interview where he's talking about how the world is gonna end by 2100, and then like the interviewer is like, "What would you do to help save the world?" He goes, "Well, I'm 72. It's not my problem."
He's like, "I don't give a fuck. I'm not seeing it." He is awesome. Apparently, he has a Facebook where he just unhinged rants on it. I went to go view it, and it was like I had to like log into my Facebook account. I don't remember my password. I was like, damn.
Yes.
But he like will just regret. He's an old man through and through. I mean, in these movies, he's just like angry about the youth.
Yeah, Paul Schrader must be protected at all costs. But yeah, so that is not really how I interpreted the ending. There's
What'd you think?
So very small detail, but when he drops the cup and he sees Amanda Seyfried show up,
Yeah.
it makes like a thump sound. It doesn't
Yeah.
make a break sound.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, that's his body dropping because he's dead. Because like it makes a completely unnatural sound. Like when you think of a glass, even if it doesn't shatter, it makes like a high pitched sound. And then here, you hear like a low thump, like something big. And it cuts at like the best time, I would say, where you're like, because I didn't remember exactly where it cut, so I was thinking there was going to be like another scene or an exchange of dialogue, but no, his ex-wife is singing a song, distracting everyone while he's gone, and then he's kissing Amanda Seyfried, and it just cuts halfway through, and it's playing this really disturbing music, and on one hand, like I really do appreciate. On one hand, like I remember when I first saw it, like it's building up. You think it's gonna build up to like a Taxi Driver-esque ending of violence, and it doesn't. And I think like that reservation on a rewatch made it even better for me. I think it's more profound to not have any violence, to have him choose like self-immolation, basically like self harm, as opposed to taking him out with him. And I think Paul Schrader agrees. As you said, he views Ethan Hawke's arc as like a selfish one, and like wanting to take violence on other people. And I really think it's great now. I think it leaves a lot to be interpreted. I choose not to think that God is talking to him this moment and saying this kiss is what heaven's like. That's not really.
I don't really think that is.
I never
either.
would have picked up on that, to be honest. But what do you think about the ending?
I mean, the whole movie is about choosing hope and love versus despair. I mean, that's Michael's plight. That's his plight.
It's about balancing.
It's about
hope and despair.
balancing hope and despair. But I mean, like, so the buildup for that scene is like he's gonna blow up. Ed Balk, he's gonna like his whole goal is like environmental terrorism. It's basically like I'm gonna kill myself and kill this, because it's like Balk Industries is like the number 5 polluter in the world. He's like, I'm gonna kill this person, everything's gonna be good. He tells Amanda Seyfried, he's like, don't go there, I don't want you there. And he puts on the suicide vest and he puts on his robes and he goes to step out and he sees her. And this is where I'm like, I love Ethan Hawke. He steps back in horror and he like disgustingly like retches a little bit and like angry growls at him. Like he's not even making human noises. He's just like, oh, he's like so horrified. He takes the barbed wire, he wraps it around himself, and then he pours the drain cleaner. He's so horrified with what he's done. And then you get they're trying to get in, at least one guy is, and then he leaves, and then Amanda Seyfried gets in, and so on and so forth. I thought of it as him choosing hope and love over despair. I don't think it really necessarily matters to me if he is dead or if he did die. I think that is like
the important thing he decides not to blow anyone
decides up. Not to blow anybody up. And that is ultimately like that's the redemption. There's a big aspect of Paul Schrader movies where it's this aspect of redemption. It's bringing out the dead, where Nick Cage, spoiler alert, mildly for bringing out the dead, but Nick Cage makes peace with his ghost. It's in Card Counter with the revenge aspect of it, which I don't want to spoil, but that character does get his aspect of redemption. It's a moment where it's like characters give themselves in only to have some kind of internal redemption. It's a theme throughout all of his movies.
I guess in one of the original cuts, you hear Amanda Seyfried's footsteps go up the stairs.
Yeah.
And then so that's why people were leaning to think that that it was really happening.
Oh, okay.
So like the final cut, the theatrical cut, he removed the footstep sounds. So interesting
that's
things
good.
like that.
Yeah.
To make it more obscure. But yeah, again, it's not really about whether he dies or not, but like it's the fact that he did choose not to take out his frustrations or his despair on anyone else.
What do you think is what do you think it says about us that the last 2 movies we've done have had ambiguous endings about the lives of the characters and their message that they leave and the
having existential crises about like, what their existence means.
Is that 2 movies in a row?
We'll be moving away from that pretty soon, as we'll go into like when we talk about what we're talking about next. But if you're done talking about the ending, do we want to get into the discussion if this is a modern classic or not?
So okay, so you've been boiling I think more than I have. What do you think? Is this a modern classic?
So I tried to look at things as objectively as I can when I'm deciding what is a modern classic. So I like this movie more. I think this movie is better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yep.
But I'm more confident that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a modern classic because it's a really great movie. It's part of Tarantino's repertoire, and Tarantino is one of the most bankable filmmakers in Hollywood. All those movies are going to be studied for decades and decades after he's gone. and this will be one of them, one of 9. So it's not like it's gonna get lost in the shuffle. It's not like it's like Martin Scorsese, he makes a movie every 2 years, which I mean, they're all, a lot of them are great, but like you have like 9 definitive movies from Tarantino.
Yeah.
And he's one of the most talked about filmmakers of all time. So yes, there's a lot of contributing factors apart from me liking the movie that make me confident that's a modern classic.
Yeah.
Here, Paul Schrader, of course, wrote Taxi Driver. He's written some of the best Raging Bull, some of the best movies of like the 1970s and 80s. But when I looked up what movies he's done since First Reformed, I had nenever heard of any of them.
Really?
And I'm someone who like tries to keep up with movies decently. So like he doesn't have any name value, and no one really cares about this movie.
Well, okay, so this is ultimately where I think it's really interesting, and this is where I don't know because what I think this movie is this movie is because we have to view it from like a film internet culture.
Yes.
The reason that this movie I saw this was because the film culture on the internet pushed this as one of the best movies of 2017. I remember there was a vote on r/movies on Reddit, which at the time of recording this has 30 million users on that thing. And the vote was like, what's the best movies of 2017? And First Reformed won. I remember this being the number 1 movies of many like YouTube reviewers that I saw who would watch movies that I didn't see. It's one of the more popular movies on Letterboxd, which is, I know these aren't representative of the culture as a whole, but there is a genuine conversation here to go, is this something that internet film culture has grabbed a hold of and will just continually push forever? I would say if we're going from a base definition of like, is this a modern classic? It has no cultural impact.
No.
None. It has.
Paul Schrader is not, like, even with Birdman, like we were talking about how Birdman's not necessarily talked about right now.
Yeah.
But within the years around it when it came out, it was a huge movie.
Yeah.
It boosted Iñárritu's career. It's the reason why The Revenant had like $100 million budget. And I mean, maybe because of Iñárritu's other activities is why he maybe is not as talked about now. But like Birdman as itself is like, I could conceivably see in like 10, 20 years, especially with how right it was with predicting like the modern cinematic universes and multiverses stuff. Like I understand, like, apart from me thinking it's a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 movie, like I think it does have a legacy to it that maybe not is like immediately right now, but it has had a legacy, and I think it will continue to. Here, it's like Paul Schrader's movies don't get any publicity at all. Like no one cares if he makes a movie. This movie was voted on Reddit as the best movie 2017. I haven't really seen it being talked about since 2017. It's not like this movie came out and like Paul Schrader had another hit after like this next movie had like some buzz around it because from the director of Formed. No, none of that. And I want it to be a modern classic because I think like in my own head it's a modern classic, but like when I'm just trying to look, like this movie's buried on HBO Max. Like this movie does not show up on any of your recommended things on HBO Max. Like you have to literally search first. Like, is it
actually like the only reason I own it on Blu-ray? Like
so I was just going through like alphabetical order like movies on HBO Max, and that's how I found it was there.
Okay, so this is like I think like Paul Schrader is clearly like within film culture is a known quantity. People know Paul Schrader. His movies, dude, have a massive like cult like following. Like they people fuck with his movies hardcore within film. But I don't know if like he had a movie came out that was Card Counter came out I think in 2021 around the pandemic. I've seen it. It takes a lot of the themes of First Reformed, puts them in a different context, but they're not as effective. Then you have Master Gardener, which I have not seen, but from my understanding about it, it is similar and about the same as Card Counter. First Reformed is like, when we're talking about this, it's just to clarify that we love this movie, right?
Yes. I like this more than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I like this.
I can't necessarily give it a modern classic because I don't want because like if we're doing a modern classic series, like what's the difference between like a modern classic and an A if we're not, if it was all just subjective, you know, like then we're just like rating movies on like how we feel about it, whereas like if I like the movie, it has an impact on whether I think it's a modern classic, but I have to look at other outlying issues.
This is exactly like Decision to Leave. No, not a modern classic. It's not even the best movie the director has made in the 2010s. No. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like you said, is a Tarantino movie. Tarantino is going to be somebody who, for better or for worse, will be studied by film, like you said, for ages to come. Birdman is something that maybe people are, because people are probably like people. I think there's a definite argument, like Birdman has talked about, if it's a modern classic because it talks about the kind of like contemporary film culture, decontextualizes it and deconstructs it, or sorry, contextualizes it and deconstructs it in a way that is invariably like pretty biting commentary on what movies are.
Yes, and it was a huge Oscar. I mean, not that the Oscars are like the end all be all, but like it did get a lot of
it was a big movie.
Award fame.
Yeah,
basically, and it's basically why Inarritu's career skyrocketed. And then if you look at Michael Keaton's career, he got so many more movies after this movie.
Yeah.
So like the people involved all had like their stock raised from this movie. Whereas who had their stock raised from First Reformed?
It sucks because it sounds like we're dogging on this movie. It's just like First Reformed is more of a film. I hate using this term, but like an online film more movie than it is like an impact. And yeah, we could look back in 20 years and be like, this was probably one of the better movies made.
Yeah.
And we could look back at it as going like, oh, this is a staple of quality filmmaking, but is it and like it could be a classic in that regard, especially as movies become more questionable in their like how good they are. And the average movie becomes worse and worse. We can look back and go, hey man, First Reformed was like the last bastion. I don't think it's a modern classic, and it
I don't
like
think it's a modern.
Me.
It's in my heart. It's a modern classic, but I cannot say it's a modern classic. Period.
It
just does not have a legacy. Yeah, it does hurt.
Me. Yeah, this one kind of sucks. Like Decision to Leave was an easy one. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was an easy one.
Which is when we say something's not a modern classic, even if like doesn't mean we think it's bad. We just don't think it has like necessarily has like a legacy to it that is worth. Which I think if this movie had more like buzz around it, like it could have a legacy, but it just has no buzz. No one cares about Paul Schrader anymore.
Yeah, it kind of
no one's stock is elevated from the movie.
Yeah,
you know,
I feel
it hurts.
This one hurts, and it's gonna hurt even more when we talk about our next couple movies.
Yeah,
because that one's gonna suck. We have to be like, this next movie is probably modern classic, but First Reformed, So. No. Matt, I am in agreement with you.
But we still recommend you watch it because it's
my god, yeah.
For me, it's a 5 out of 5 movie.
Same here. Like unequivocally. It's also for me like similar to you.
Prove us wrong.
Yeah, please. Yeah, let us know. Like, make this movie great. But it's like the same about how you like Birdman the best, and then this one I like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Then this, then like it's almost there. It's just like you watch it and you're like, this is special. It's not.
Which is funny because like Decision to Leave is the worst movie that we've done so far. Yeah, but it's still like a really great movie.
It's a really great movie. Yeah, it's done by a great director. That will probably change as we talk about our next couple movies. Matt, do you have any final points on our heartbreaking decision for First Reformed not to be in our canon?
They were hiding in the basement, praying to God.
Praying to God they don't die.
Yeah, that's my last point.
That's your last point. Okay. Well, this magical mystery tour ride, that is the thing that they do in the movie. Is over. It's over. Matt, what are we talking about next week?
Talking about we're selling out. We're gonna be Marvel shills. We're gonna talk about Iron Man 2008. Iron Man?
Yes. That will be the oldest one we talk about so far.
Yep.
So there's a lot to say. I'm interested.
We'll probably be talking more about what happened post Iron Man than probably the movie itself. But I'm legitimately excited to review it because I've not seen it in a long time.
It's still a good movie. I watched it a couple years ago because I was showing my younger brother the Marvel movies. And I remember going, that's good. Like, that's a good movie.
Yeah, okay. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Because when we do modern classics, we don't want to just be like talking about like small indie movies that no one cares about except for us. Like, we want to like actually talk about movies of the 2010s that defined the 2010s.
Yeah.
Too, and 2020s as well.
We don't want to spoil the one after Iron Man, but that one is also going to be one where we probably have to like really reconcile with the fact that most of our discussion will be about the external context around the movie, rather than the movie itself.
The decay of film criticism, as we like to call it.
Oh God, that one. I'm really looking forward to. Okay, our podcast,
the birth of grifters on movie criticism.
If you can guess it, I bet you probably can. But
we've given a lot of hints.
We get a lot of hints. It was basically the death of everything we love.
Yeah.
It personally ruined us. Okay. Our all our podcasts are on, like, it's on Apple now. It was a pain in the ass to get it done, but I did it. Shout out to our new logo.
Can we never refer to this as potting?
Yeah.
Like, I like Real Big Picture Show a lot, but when they refer to like what they're doing as potting, it legitimately makes me angry. Because I was inside the gym and like I work out harder when I hear them say that because I get fed up.
Yeah, no, I don't care. We just talk about movies. We're nobody, like, it doesn't.
Yeah, no one cares about us.
Yeah, no one cares.
Our stupid modern classic series. I'm sure Tarantino. I'm sure Paul Schrader is so disappointed that we didn't give him the.
We're gonna get an angry Facebook rant about the youth.
Yeah,
fucking youth. Okay.
When they're modern classic.
Hey, Paul Schrader, how's it going? It's good. Okay.
Yeah.
My last note I wrote here before I end is I just wrote in an exclamation point, the drain cleaner, exclamation point. And when I die and these notes are lost to time, and people look through them and be like, what was he doing when he was 25? And they just see the note.
Post 2100 when the aliens come down to our eradicated Earth.
They're just like, who is this notebook? And it's just a guy who wrote the drain cleaner and an exclamation point, because that's what real film criticism
will be studied for millennia to come. What did he mean? The drain cleaner.
Okay. Well, that's it for us. I hope you guys enjoyed. It might be a little chopped to shit at the beginning because we were losing internet because LA is orchestrating to drive me to a breaking point, as evident by my Great Gatsby haircut and my broccoli haircut. So thank you. So yeah, Matt, any final points before we go?
I was really proud of how the insults came to me, like in that
was
moment.
good.
I was like, what do you look like? F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
Proud of myself.
That was probably the best representation of what our friendship is. It's just like pure unbridled anger.
I would agree.
Okay, all right, guys. Thank you guys for watching. We will be back next week. Enjoy. Go watch this movie, and goodbye.